this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Kitchen session. No, I'm not going to film all of this. Well, I may well film all of it, but I doubt if I'll post all of it. Everything in here is here for a reason, not necessarily the same reason, but it's going to be similar, isn't it? The Rossioglossum is in whatever it was in when I got it, which is that cocoa fibre stuff, and that's it. I've been waiting to see what would happen with these new growths, and I was not sure whether they'd actually produced their roots a while ago, so there won't be any new ones, or whether they were still to produce them. There are new roots just starting, so I'm going to grab that while the timing's right, as they say. This Restrepia, I repotted it when I got it. It's been in the pot a long time. Most of those roots are not live, but there are some. There are some relatively new roots and a lot of old ones, but there is some new growth there. That's just been in its pot too long, heavy on the moss. We know what we're thinking about moss at the moment. This is the Masdevallia from the pH test that I did, that I said I wanted to just leave out of its pot and dry off, which it hasn't done. It's had less than 24 hours, so. But that's here because the media has definitely gone off. So anything that was repotted around the time that this was, that's still in the same media and was heavy on the moss, I can say pretty safely that media's gone off, hasn't it? So these two come into the same category. Whoops. These are the two little Restrepias that came down when Hannah went in hospital and stayed, and they were rootless when I got them. Again, heavy on the moss, been in there quite a while. These are nice little plants, and they have now got roots, so it's got to be worth looking after them, especially as they're Hannah's. This one's in the same boat. Again, it grew some roots, it's put on some new growth, heavy on the moss, been in the pot a while. This is my miltoniopsis phalaenopsis, so a miltoniopsis species. Now I repotted this when I got it, and it was heavy on the moss. All of my miltoniopsis are going in the cocoa husk, so this is a change of media while I've got some roots actually growing. So I'm going to take advantage of those roots growing. There's also a new growth just starting there as well. I don't believe this is growing as well as it should do, and because of the moss and everything, I've been letting this get almost dry in between waterings, and I don't think it's doing it any good. So that's going to go in pure cocoa husk, chopped up very, very small, because it's a miniature plant with a finer root system. So that's getting its media changed, because I'm not happy with what it's in, even though it hasn't been in there a huge amount of time. I want the moss gone before it goes off and takes the root system down. This Dendrobium is not necessarily growing roots, but it has a good root system on it. It's been in this pot quite a long time, and I'm not sure when it's going to push out its next new growth. It's a nobly type, but it's an unusual one. And it's a rescue basically. It's taken a long time to actually get to grow, starting from what was a kiki, produced a funny shaped new growth basically, and has finally produced a reasonable new growth. I want that in some reasonable media for the next set of roots, which will probably be in the spring, along with the new growth. Might even get some blooms on that this time round. Now this is a tiny little piece of the yellow miltoniopsis that I got back at our show, and because it's yellow, and yellow is you know, like hen's teeth, there aren't many yellow miltoniopsis even in amongst the hybrids. I thought, well, we'll just stick that bulb to one side and see if it grows. Well, this part of the plant died, just rotted away, and this part of the plant has got a new growth, and I suspect there will be some roots underneath that bit. I just want that out of the moss, so that when those roots do grow, that young growth gets its best chance. And then this one came from Lynn. This is a it's a Dracuvallia, so it's a cross between a Dracula and a Masdevallia. It's a letter page and it won't grow. It keeps trying, it keeps pushing up new growths, and they keep ending up being distorted and not pushing up to the full size. When you've got troubles, chances are the problem's in the pot. So out of the pot it comes to see what's going on. As yet unknown. So that's what's going on. I'm going to leave the camera running. I may heavily edit what I end up with, because what I end up with could be all sorts. But the one thing we will definitely have at the end of all this is a mess. So this one hasn't been out of the pot since I got it. I don't think it had been repotted that long before I got it. That smells. Again, quite heavy on the moss, and I'm reasonably pleased that there are some roots that don't look too bad. I think this is just a matter of getting this moss out, getting this in. So there are some dead roots in here, but there's also some live ones. So this is a rinse under the tap. This looks like it's possibly two plants here, you know. Yeah, it is. Right, yeah, that could change what happens here. This back end here can come off, there's no point in that staying there. Is that bugs? Well, that's not going to do them any good. Yeah, it's got scale. Well, that's not going to help, is it? So we'll deal with that while we've got it out of the pot. It's not bad, but it's there. And now that we know that the type of scale that I've got does actually introduce toxins into the plant when they bite into it. So the problem here might just be the scale that's actually weakening the plant and stopping these new growths progressing. So we've got a piece there, and then here. So I'm looking inside of sheaths now. Now that I know there are some scale on the plant, there could be more and there could be lots, and the sheaths are where they'll get. No, this part of the plant looks okay. That's rotten, so that can come off. And we do have a piece here that has got some growing roots, but there's a root tip that's failed. So it's not happy. Needs fresh media, and then we'll see how it goes. There's a new growth failed completely there, rotted off. There's a new growth here with a distorted leaf, and again there. So it's not growing well. We'll see what we can do, but I'm not potting those up separately. They will go in the same pot, and they'll go in a pot where I can see the roots. I'm not too good with so I'm just getting this polystyrene out, the chips. I may reuse those, but they can't go in the recycle bin, so I've got to keep those separate, and I often forget, and they're going to get buried in here, I suspect. Well, that's got some growth stones. I'm looking at getting some of them. Right, the tiny little miltoniopsis then. Let's see if we've got any roots. Oh, that's really soggy. That hasn't been watered for ages. So this back end of the plant is rotten. That needs coming off. And that leaves a not very good root system at all. That there are signs of some roots coming from this new growth here. Not very good, not very good at all. Moss again. So we'll get that in some, there's a huge big root there and it's completely dead. It's just falling apart. Look. So anyway, that's that one. Next, let's have the little Dendrobium out next. As I say, this has been in the pot a while, and if I leave it till the spring, until the new roots grow, it will have been in this pot longer than I want it to be, even though it would stay quite dry in the winter because it is a nobly type. But the fact that I lost my records, I didn't have the notes to say whether this had any moss in the pot. Now it hasn't. It's just bark. So it could have stayed in there, but it's out now. We won't do too much trimming with that. We will just, that's going back in bark, so you know. But it can go in, it can have some larger bark in with it this time, because that's just small bark. That's that one. Right, this one's easy enough, because this is the one we took out yesterday. And we know that the media has definitely gone, but we also know that we've got some reasonable roots here. I suspect in the middle of the pot we've got dead roots, but oh, this is so wet. But then it did soak in a pot for an hour, didn't it? What can you expect? I don't like repotting soggy things like this, I must admit. But well, we've got some good roots here. I think this is just a matter of getting it in some fresh media that's more suited to it, rather than moss that's gone off. Quite a bit of trimming to do. There's quite a lot of dead stuff here, but there's also some good stuff. So that's just a tidy up, rinse under the tap, get the rest of the moss out, tidy it up, and you can see that there will be some white roots. These are good firm roots here. So there's enough there to rescue that. Not that one though. That's the Masdevallia. That's my coffee. It is now 1:45, so lunchtime, but I've had my lunch. And this session will probably take me all afternoon. It won't be done in one session. I'm not that daft. Because you get tired. When you get tired, you get sloppy. And I don't want to do that. So now we do have some reasonable roots here. We do have the traditional dead set in the middle, but we do have some good roots, certainly enough to get that going. Some of the larger hybrid miltoniopsis that went in the cocoa husk a while back now, they didn't have as good a root system as this, and I still don't know whether they're growing in that husk, because whatever new roots there will be with those miltoniopsis will be in the centre of the pot, and they're going to take a while before they get to the edge, so it'll be a while before we see them. Right, that's not a bad little root system. That will pull on. That's, as a matter of interest, although that's a miltoniopsis and it's a species, it comes from lower cloud forests, so it actually comes from places where the temperature's a bit higher than most of the other miltoniopsis come from. So you could say it's more heat tolerant, although I wouldn't go mad. I think the important thing with the miltoniopsis is to find their happy place. And once you get into the species, there's only 5 after all. I think it's 5 anyway. It's just a matter of each one's probably got a different happy place, so you can't lump them all together. Right, so that's that one. The 2 little Restrepias. Now this is need to keep their tags with them because they're almost identical plants. So we'll keep their tags. Yeah, been in the pot too long. A lot of these roots have died back. Heavy on the moss, but we do have some live roots. It's difficult to tell with Restrepia roots because if the media discolours the roots, the dead ones look exactly the same as the live ones. It's only if you've got a nice shiny fresh new one that it's shiny pure white. You very rarely see growing tips on Restrepia roots as well. They're so fine. But this is a nice live root here. These are live roots. So there's some there, and quite honestly there's a lot of live roots here. There's just a cluster of dead ones here in the centre. So that's not too bad. There's my tag. I'm not going to put that in the sink. I'm going to keep these 2 separate with their tags, or they'll go missing. Or they get separated. As I said, the plants are almost identical. I know Hannah spent quite a long time when she was looking into getting some different types of orchids, apart from the Phalaenopsis that she already had. She wanted to try and see if she could grow other things in her flat, or apartment as some people would call it. And she couldn't get the plants where they would get a lot of light, so we had to choose plants that didn't need a lot of light, and Restrepias sounded absolutely ideal. But what's the thing that's missing in an apartment? Humidity. And they just weren't happy. They just didn't grow. We had humidity trays, you know, gravel trays and all that, but they just weren't happy. And there's only a few places in the flat where anything can go, because she's got 2 cats, and because they're in a flat they're not allowed outside. Difficult when you're on the 2nd floor. So they play with absolutely everything. Anything that's new that's introduced to their environment has got to be whacked around and bitten and chewed. So there was only a couple of places where the orchids could go. I built some shelves for her and put them up in her kitchen, which is like long and narrow with a window. So they were on the opposite side to the window, so they got some light. But it was the lack of humidity that did them in. But we tried a couple of Paphiopedilums, a couple of Restrepias. She had a couple of my Dendrobiums, but prior to her going in hospital, none of them got looked after. The last thing on her mind was messing about with orchids, so they deteriorated badly. And I mean, once she went in hospital, obviously there was no way she could look after her orchids, so I brought the whole lot down here, as some of them were just thrown away at the time because they were too far gone, and some I tried to rescue. This one, however, came from the Eric Young Foundation originally, and Peter White had a tray full of them at one of our shows, and the Eric Young Foundation Restrepia hybrids have normally got some of the largest blooms on of the Restrepia world, very, very large in comparison to some others. So I grabbed a couple of those. The 2 that I grabbed ended up with blooms that were so similar. One of them, I don't know whether it went in the Orchids to Go, I think, or it might have gone in the last giveaway, I don't know. See, now the root system on here, there's a lot of dead roots in here, but they're not all dead, and trying to differentiate between dead and live roots will be almost impossible. So all I'll do is have a clear out underneath the centre of the plant, leaving the ones around the outside. But this is what I was getting at with Restrepias. When you repot them, they're very difficult to get the media, the roots, evenly spread through the media, because there's a tendency to push the media down the outside of the pot, and the roots end up doing that, and then they're all squashed together in the middle, often with no media in amongst them at all, and they will fail. Restrepia roots under those circumstances will fail. They need to be in something, they need to touch. Right, and last but not least, the biggie. This is a Rossioglossum, which is a relative cousin, I suppose you could say, to the Odontoglossums. A cool grower, doesn't like excessive light, and needs to stay moist but not soggy. How many times I've said that in my life since I started doing videos. No soggy bottoms. But what we've got here, luckily, was a very large air cone on that pot. So although this is in actual peat, well, it looks like it, this is peat. I don't think this is coir, although it may have been once and it's broken down. But whatever it is, these are a bit along the lines of your zygo roots. They're fragile. They do break very easily. They look big and fleshy, and when you see that, you sort of think to yourself, so I've got a solid lump of something here. I'm trying to find out what I've got here. Ah, right, so that explains that. What I've got here is a solid lump of dead roots. So that just needs, that's the centre of the plant. That just needs to be cut off. And then just a matter of probably do better running this under the tap. But this is the area I need to go very careful. We do have some live root tips here, and I need those. They're precious. And some of the older ones are branching in this area too. So that's going to have to go under the tap so that I can see what's what. But I suspect this centre core here can just come out. What this looks like has happened is it's been potted on. So it had a root mass, you know, with most of the roots around the outside of a small pot. It was lifted out, and without taking the old media out, was put in another pot with this peat stuff as the media, and then the roots have grown to the edge of the pot for a second time, leaving behind that centre section, which has promptly died. That's the bit that would stay too wet. Right, so under the tap with you, we've got 4 growths maturing here. Now that I know it's going to push some roots out, I'm even more confident that these may well bloom. But these are different shaped pseudobulbs to your normal oncidium types. They're very flat. If you look at the cross section of this pseudobulb, it's very narrow, and they're very egg shaped. So they're actually quite large pseudobulbs, but in cross section they're incredibly narrow. They've got no depth to them, very flat, but that's how they are. And they can get bigger than this, the actual pseudobulbs. Leaves come out the top, and all these bracts eventually just disappear. You're left with a pseudobulb with 2 leaves sticking out the top, and that's all you're left with after a while. So that's that one. Let's put that one in the sink gently. Right, so that's everything out of the pots. Now I've got a massive clean-up to do with care in some cases, and these are the only 2 that I need to be careful with, these 2 little Restrepias, because as I say, they're virtually identical plants and they are different. One of them actually is it's an Antenifera, which is one I've already got, but it's got a B in quotes on the end of it, and I believe that is one of Burnham's own. But it was one that Hannah chose anyway. And then the other one I think she chose because it does have very large blooms on it for a species, and that's Ephipium. Yeah, strange word. So that's everything out. Clean up in the sink now, and then I'll be back with all the paraphernalia to get these potted up. There's no mounts here. Quite honestly, any of these could be mounted. You can mount a Restrepia if you want, but you'll have a job to keep it hydrated. If you want to do that amount of work, and in the summer that could even be 3 times a day, yeah, unless you put a hell of a lot of moss on the mount. But they will mount, they are epiphytes. But these are all going in pots of different sizes and shapes and amount of air for the various plants that there are. So I will film it, and what I might actually do is, this will be part 1, getting them out of the pots. So part 2, what I think I'll do, because that's too long a session to do each one, what I might do is show the plant cleaned up and the decision making process to the size of the pot and the media that it's going to get, and then the repotting bit itself I'll speed right up. So we'll be doing all that, like, you know. I haven't done that for ages, but the software I've got is very easy to do. You just select either end of it like that and squash it. So it works quite well. But yeah, just speed up the actual potting bit, as it will be tedious otherwise. That way at least you get to hear about each plant and why I've selected that pot and that media, which is what most people are interested. Watching me poke the media down the side of the roots is not, it's the same every time, isn't it, really? Anyway, so that's part 1. Part 2, this is, what are we today? Saturday. Yes, so this is today's video. This will be processed and posted later today. The rest of the video clips will be put to one side and probably posted either Monday or Tuesday. Sunday will be the Sunday chat, that's Sunday's video. on the right day for a change. And then what's left of this session will become 1 or 2 other videos for during next week sometime. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, I forgot the joke, didn't I? I did say there would be a joke when I remember, and I won't always remember. Quite honestly, compared with some, this isn't one of the better ones, but there's a guy about 95, really getting on a bit like that, and he goes to his regular doctor's appointment, and he said, very pleased to tell you, doctor, but I'm getting married. And the doctor says, you're not exactly in the best of health, you know. He said, yeah, but you know, if I get married, I'll have somebody to look after me at home, won't I? And you know, small village again, doctor says, is it anyone I know? And he said, yeah, it's that young lass from the baker's shop. He said, she's only 17. He said, yeah. And he said, well, that may not do your health the world of good. And what I will tell you is, in strictest confidence, you take it or leave it, but I would suggest you take in a lodger. If you're going to marry somebody that young at your age, take in a lodger. Trust me. Okay. So away he goes, the marriage takes place. He ends up back at the doctor's again a while later, and he said, really pleased to tell you, doctor, my wife's pregnant. And the doctor looks at him and he said, did you get a lodger like I asked you to? He said, yeah, she's pregnant too. See you later.